Final.
We're ready.
Ready?
We're ready.
All right. Good. Well, I did pass out a summary sheet of our budget. I had some extra copies. I know some have gone around. If it's all right with the council and the mayor, I'll just quickly go over the numbers. This $1,633,000 is where we ended up with the city and school budgets together, plus over last year's, well, the current year approved amount, $1,633,000 above that with the city and school budgets submitted. The Finance Committee of the Council met last Thursday and have recommended two reductions to the number. One is the current year, I forgot my S on surplus here. Current year savings. We think that in our current year budget, with getting more revenue than what we thought and spending less money within all our city departments, that there could be a total of $400,000 savings in our current year budget. And the other reduction is $200,000 that you see outlined on the sheets that I passed out. And that's the result of the work from the Finance Committee last Thursday. So I guess as we stand right now, this is the amount that we have over our current year budget.
Mike, the $600,000, if I recall, makes us flat with last year's budget. Isn't that correct?
If we take 200 off the city's amount, it makes
us flat with last year's budget.
Right. Right. Because all of these budget reductions are on the city's.
From a spending side.
Right.
From the spending side.
Right.
Spending side.
Spending side, not talking about revenues.
Exactly.
And on the revenue side, I mean, that's what contributed to this number here.
Because we're taking less out of our surplus to maintain 12% surplus.
We're proposing to take over 1 million less out of our surplus.
We gotta add that 400,000 in, because that's coming out of surplus.
Yeah. The
So it's
400,000 you add back in is actually.
Right.
But it keeps us at, but we're
Right,
staying
right,
at,
but when he said over 1 million less, it's not over 1 million less. Now, if we had that 400 in, we would be taking 764,
Yeah, I got you.
not 364.
but maintaining a good solid.
Correct.
Yeah. So I mean, that's one thing the Finance Committee talked about last week was maintaining a surplus at 12% of our total budget. I know
Because we've been told we really need to, not because we want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we're told we need to.
in writing.
Yes.
By S&P.
S&P and bond lending standpoint, yes.
Right.
So, taking away the 600 thou, what kind of a mill rate increase are we looking at?
That represents 1 3/4 mill increase. 1 2/3, 1 3/4. Because a mill in Waterville raises approximately 650,000, so you get 650 plus another 2/3 of a mill there, 3/4. Right.
So on a $100,000 home, how much would that be? 1 3/4 increase.
Roughly $100 per mill.
I need time to double check that.
$175.
You figured it out? Yeah.
So 150, 170 bucks?
Yeah.
On top of what they already do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Then you got the rebound coming.
We have a lot of homes valued more than that.
We have,
So that,
You might, but we don't.
hey, we can approach this a number of different ways. Council could say the only increase, if any, we're prepared to live with is X amount, and that tells us what the number has to be. Or we just continue to look for any other savings or revenue enhancements.
So we have to have a tax increase this year? Can we just keep it flat in line what we had last year?
Could make more cuts.
We find the cuts to do this.
But I would like to just add my own opinion on that since you asked. I think it would be a grave mistake not to have some kind of an increase going into next year.
And what are the reasons, Nick?
The reason being, we have spent our surplus down. And if we're going to adhere to the 12% limit, which I believe we should, then we're putting ourselves in a much worse position a year from now with an even bigger increase. We probably should have increased a little last year, a little this year. We didn't do anything last year, did not do anything again.
And where does that increase next year come from? That you're talking about?
I'm not sure I understand.
Because you just said next year we would need even more than this year.
If we do nothing this year,
Right. So where, if we do nothing this year, where would the increase then next year come from?
See that?
either budget reductions or tax increase,
Right, but where does the spending increase come from for the necessity of tax increases?
Probably those contracts.
I want to be honest, it comes from debt spending and contracts, because it comes from debt spending and
Well, not only that, but we're putting off purchases, we're putting off a native police cruiser, we're putting off, what, $50,000 worth of planned maintenance on our roads. We're taking $70,000 out of public works, which I don't know if, we discussed it with Mark, but he's got to deal with it. I mean, the point is, the reason we're doing this is because revenue sharing has disappeared. The amount that we've lost in our revenue sharing is almost exactly what we're raising taxes.
almost exactly this amount. It's $942,000.
The governor's going to announce another surplus this summer, and you can bet your bottom dollar that it's going to be about what we're losing in revenue sharing.
Revenue sharing is a piece of it, but if we continue to do business in a way that increases spending on a regular basis, year after year, we cannot simply just point our finger at the state and say, well, it's their fault.
Between 2008 and 2013, Maine Municipal determined localities raised their costs about 2% a year, which is really close to inflation. You know, the governor keeps arguing they can do better, but I don't know where the governor's coming from. I mean, you can argue unions, you can argue...
What I'm,
As long as we have state mandates, I've been an ardent proponent of revenue sharing. I just don't think that we can continue to only have that one discussion point and not just be transparent with people about the fact that there's spending increases and how and why those spending increases are built in. Frankly, people might even be more apt to embrace that if they understand it and feel like we're being honest about where the spending comes from. Or we can have a discussion with the taxpayers about how we do business as a city,
I don't
because
think-
frankly, we need to have a bit of respect that taxpayers understand that we are, yes, we have lost revenue sharing, they get that. But when they see, why are my taxes going up this year? You're getting the same amount of revenue sharing as you got last year projected. Why are my taxes going up? Where does the spending increase come
because we
from?
can't spend the surplus like we did last year. That's why the taxes.
That's part of it, but living off of a surplus is living in a dream world.
That's what I'm maintaining too. And so what I'm really worried about is that we're not going to have any money for any capital improvements for the next 3 years. So when our public works equipment needs to be replaced, I don't see how we're going to do it unless we want to borrow again. Because we're not going to have any surplus to use for our capital purposes.
Mike, when does the reassessment go into effect?
It will go into effect a year from now.
So not the fiscal year starting in July, but the next...
The next fiscal year starting in July.
But that's not going to increase revenue.
No, it's not good. Well, if we find properties that we've missed assessing, or that have been, people have added things on and we haven't found it, then that way it would increase. But I think that's negligible.
Yeah, but it's not true blown reliability. We can't put all our eggs into that because that's,
Don't know.
we just don't know.
Don't know. No. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're receiving average $942,000 a year less in revenue share.
Yes, and I'm not arguing that. I'm merely saying if we're going to be transparent about this, we need to say, yes, we have lost revenue sharing, and here's the impact that had, but we also have increased spending here, here, and here. These are the cuts we've made to try to offset some of that. But when you talk about a budget, you have to talk about it in whole rather than just take the easy way out and just say, well, it's that one number thing. That's all I'm saying.
I just want to be careful, because when you say transparent, that sounds like dishonesty. And I want to just be very careful.
You say it sounds like dishonesty. I
Well,
don't think it does. I
But
think it just says that we
could
just need to
sound
be
that
very
way. I just
open.
want to be careful that we're not saying that there's like dishonesty going on. And I think transparency is good, but I think taking a look at the budget the way we're doing is good. I just want to be careful, because to me, when I hear transparent and that like this is the first time we're going to be transparent, it almost sounds like this is the first time we're going to be honest. And I just want to be careful that, I don't think that's what you're saying.
All right, no,
hope-
I guess
hope-
maybe full disclosure. I don't know, I'm not saying anyone's being dishonest, but I'm saying we need to discuss every point of the budget. You know, I think people are willing to pay for services. I mean, we don't want to gut our budget. We've had this discussion, we just had it at Finance Committee, where we talked about, you don't want to save a couple $100 on a tax bill and lose $30,000 of value in your home. It's not worth gutting your services to the point where everyone's property value is going to a week, either.
I know that Eric Haley wanted to offer something that has come up just in the last couple of days, I guess, from your revenue perspective.
Yeah, some good news. Change the story a little bit here. I went to Peter Teepatot and I are always invited to Drummond Woodson's annual law review, where they update everything that's happened in the state and precedent-setting cases. And Main School Management's always there. Connie Brown, who's the CEO of Main School Management, announced at the beginning of that conference that it's almost a foregone conclusion that they will be adding revenue to general purpose aid. It's only a question of how much, and that number appears to be somewhere between 21 and 28 million. And you've heard me say before that what that would amount to, Waterville, as a rough estimate, is whatever they put in, we get about 1%. So if they put 26 million in, that would be 260,000 more, roughly, coming to Waterville. That's very good news. And Nick, Mayor, I think I saw in the paper where you were quoted as saying that we shouldn't do anything with the school budget until we have known revenues from the state. And I think that's a very good thing to do, because we don't have to go out for the referendum validation vote, which is driving the other two communities that I deal with to have to come up with ways to figure out how do we, because referendums, of course, vote on your expenditure side only. They tell you the maximum you can spend. So you can't put money in there, you shouldn't put money in there that you don't have yet, even though you anticipate you're going to get some more. So I think as far as the school budget is concerned, I think that was a very good idea that we wait. It's not going to hurt us in any way that we wait to see what our real revenues are. And if you're talking about that kind of number, that's going to change dramatically what we're asking for. Right now, as the budget stands, the last time we presented, we're asking for $652,000 more dollars. That would almost cut that in half. Here's the other piece that Paula and I have been working on over the last couple of days. We've now gone into this year's budget and started making projections on payroll and expenditures to see what our carry forward. Our preliminary numbers are very good. What we're waiting for right now are projections on payroll. So we get payroll to work through what are you estimating the cost to pay everybody for the rest of this year is. Then we can deduct that out of what we have left on the expenditure side and say, here's what we're anticipating carrying forward. If that number is what we're thinking it is, we're going to be able to help more on the revenue side. So we'll be able to offset again some of that 652. So we could be in a very near future in a much better place as far as what we're asking for new taxes.
I still think there's room to cut some non-salary items there, but I'm not going to. You and I, and Councilor Boucher have talked about meeting and because of scheduling, so we don't need to get into that tonight. But I do think that regardless of revenues, I do think there's some items in there that are non-payroll that we could probably still take a look at and talk about. I realize I can't tell the school board or school administration what to spend money on, but I have some ideas.
No, but I think a conversation sitting down, I'd welcome that meeting with anybody that wants to sit down and review the school budget and talk about it, because that's what I do.
When do you anticipate finalizing what you're going to get from the state, and your carryover from 2014?
I can finalize the carryover for, at least our estimate, for 2014 by the end of this week. I will not have the state revenues. Probably, according to Maine School Management, they don't foresee that that number, that budget's going to be finalized until the third week in June, just before they have to. Because there's too many other issues tied up in the budget. So I really don't see us having that number until late. But I also remember one Saturday morning on July 1st, sitting here approving a city school budget one year, when we had the same kind of issues going on at the state level. So I see that as good news.
We're gonna have a budget done though, Mike, when?
Our budget really should be approved by July 1st, the start of the next fiscal year.
Okay, we don't have the referendum to worry about.
No, no.
No, with the third week's fine. I mean, it's closer to the reality of where the legislature will be on some of these pieces that'll be finalized. I'd rather wait than be sorry.
That was one of my questions. Does the council want to start the budget voting next Tuesday night, the 19th, or?
We have a lot more work to do.
Well,
Yeah.
then you're going to have to take 3 votes in June. One would be the first meeting in June, and the second meeting in June would be the final 2 votes. If you want to do it by July 1st. Again, that's your call.
I don't know, it's the council's call, but I mean, I feel,
Just remember all
Right.
the memorable words
Do an
of
extra
David
review.
Bernier. Said, well, I'll be out to camp.
Well, there's 5 Tuesdays in June, so I think there's plenty of time.
There's plenty of time.
To have a quorum and
Okay?
I think my biggest concern is that, for the last few years, that we've really asked the taxpayers to take a big burden with tax increases every year. We've asked them to do pay-as-you-throw to help the city, and it's time to say, okay, we've asked you to do all these things, and we as a council and we as all these boards have worked together to keep the tax increase down, but there comes a point, and I do agree with the mayor, that we say, when do we stop? I mean, the taxpayers really have taken a beating for a few years now. And we, like you said, we understand the revenue sharing is taken away from us. But I think it's our responsibility to take a break and look at this, to cut what we can cut, to keep the taxes the same this year.
Well, we didn't have a tax increase last year.
But because we borrowed from the revenue. And I just really think that the taxpayers in the city have stepped up with the pay-as-you-throw program to help the city. And at first there was, some committing high, and I was one of them. But I think we need to really take into perspective what their burden is.
because they're not getting broad 2 and 3% increases in their salaries, I guarantee. I've actually talked to a lot of people in the last couple of weeks. And actually I've had some great conversations, those who agree with me and those who disagree. And they've all been quite respectful, but I'd say majority of people I've talked to have not seen those kinds of increases in their pay. I've talked to a lot of people who get 0. And if you talk to a lot of business owners, they get 0 too, because that's just how the economy has been. And I really hope that, if it takes the fact that we've gotten to this point with our taxes to start really doing a self-reflection to say, hey, wait a minute, we're just passing these broad contracts and then showing up to budget time saying, hey, taxpayer, I need, this is how much we need. I mean, it's a time for serious thinking about how we do this going forward. I really hope that we change how we do it.
And I agree with that, because I, like him,
It's unsustainable.
yeah,
You can't have that kind of an increase constantly without the revenue side. Unfortunately, the hard part was with government, the revenue side, we just say, oh, it's taxes. So it either comes from raising the rates or building the tax base. Well, if we haven't been building the tax base, and we haven't seen that kind of economic development, and we need to work on that, then we need to just face reality and say, well, we can't just use the taxpayers as a credit card. Because then what happens is more and more for sale signs go up. There are people, several of us campaigned, this row right here.
Right.
I guarantee each one of us heard stories about why people are moving out of Waterville. It's not because they're disappointed with the services, it's, but at some point, they realize they can't afford that.
The city generates sales tax, the city generates excise tax, things the state is taking away from us. Why aren't we in touch with that stuff?
We absolutely are, John, and I'm not arguing that at all. In fact, I went down to Augusta to argue the same thing, and we've had meetings with our legislators to argue that as well.
Where are we gonna cut? Where are we gonna cut? I know you're saying we've got to do contracts differently. And I disagree with you in terms of what people in the industry make across the board. But by the same token, those contracts are in place. And I'm hearing Karen saying we've got to do something. I want to hear a proposal where we're going to cut.
John, I think that in our reality, John, people want to live in Waterville. People really do want to live in Waterville because
Okay, where are we
it's very,
gonna
very convenient to come to Waterville and to live here instead of driving from Benton, Clinton. But what's driving them away from Waterville is our mill rate. And
Okay,
you're right,
where
what
are
do
we
we
gonna
cut?
Is our what?
Is our mill rate, is
Oh,
keeping
mill rate.
people away from Waterville.
What do we cut? Tell me what we cut.
I don't know, how about, well, you cut Franco Fest, we can cut our spending to Waterville Main Street, there's a lot of things we can cut. Let's look at the little incidences that we're spending on things that we really don't need
We're
to spend on.
cutting KV Cog.
And how much was that,
We're
John?
cutting,
$18,000. Mayor's
KV
School
Cash.
District, $3,500. The transportation, $61. Kennebec Behavioral Health, $10,000. But what about all these festivals? Like I said, does the city need to sponsor all these festivals?
what's that going to save us? Another 10,000 maybe for lucky?
Then I think, like again, we need to sit down and we need to look at this budget again.
Yep. The governor wants more than anything to cut state income taxes entirely.
Absolutely, he does do. He does. I mean, everyone's ready to pay
And his theory is you guys down in those towns can cut spending. And that's basically what we're doing now. I just don't agree with the governor's theory.
And there are a lot of people that don't agree with Paul Page. But at this point, we have to deal with the cards that are dealt to us.
I think, like Nick says, we have to have, obviously we can't do much about it this year, but looking ahead, we do have to have better contract negotiations. And John, I know that you don't agree with that, but the thing about it is,
I don't know that he disagrees with
I
it.
don't think
Well-
I disagree, I just,
well, there's questions. I know from the private business sector, and I've talked to a lot of business owners that live on Mayflower Hill, that live, in my neighborhood, and they're prevalent business owners, and they don't even give their top managers raises. As a matter of fact, they have put freezes on their raises because from a profit standpoint in the business sector in Central Maine is so poor. The P&L budgets for their bottom line is not there. So they're freezing top line salaries.
Managers at Fairpoint aren't getting raises.
And this doesn't correlate, in my opinion, necessarily on a department basis as we look more and more and we dig more into the budget. And like we said before, Nick said before, this does not have any correlation or relation to the private sector. And the private sector is the engine that drives the economy. So the thing about it is that we all have to face reality and we have to sacrifice. And that comes right from contract negotiations and living in a reality world. Economic development is needed in the city of Waterville more so than anything, and I look at that as a huge investment to get ourselves up off our knees because we're basically in a prayer position here, folks.
are we going to pay for that?
We're in a prayer position. I'm just saying, I wouldn't look at that as how we're going to pay for that. I would look at that as an investment. We're investing on this $3 million bond by buying the things that we need. We're getting equipment. We're getting a whole bunch of things from the bond that was just passed by the previous administration in December. But what we really need, looking ahead, we do need an economic development director because from Bangor down, we don't have any. Every other municipal entity has one. Some have even three, like the city of Augusta. And look where their economy is booming. Their mill rate's around 15, 16, and they're doing just fine because they have people working and showing a reflection of that economic opportunity. I mean, they're booming now.
Anyway, I think we can summarize by saying we got more work to do. I think we made some meaningful cuts and not cuts. And let's be clear, the cuts we made are not cuts we want that we feel good about. No one's here celebrating because we've made these cuts, and that needs to be very clear. We've got more work to do. I think the schools have more work to do, but we've all said we need to wait. That there is some waiting game on the revenue side, and that does have an impact. So
Well, I think the conversation is useful because
yeah.
when we have people come to the council arguing about, vandalism on downtown Main Street, for instance, or in the South End, and why don't we have more police, or why don't we have more security down there, why don't we have a fund to fix these things, but we don't want to raise taxes. And I think taxpayers need to realize that this is why we don't have a lot of this stuff, that we're struggling with not being able to hire. I mean, we've been asking for a South End police officer for years now, and each time we're told that we can't afford it, we can't do it. Now we're cutting a police car that was previously in the budget. I mean, we can't have it both ways.
But this is where I say if we treated our own like the taxpayers and just said, hey, everyone gets maybe if we passed broad 1% pay increases like the town of Oakland just did for their municipal employees. I realize their school district has passed 3%, but then maybe we would have some. And again, I'm not arguing that we shouldn't get the revenue share. I'm not making any of those arguments. But there's a certain reality that we're living in right now, and we need to live within the parameters of that and realize we can't just say, well, this is what the budget is. So I think we could have some of those things if we were more realistic. I mean, every customer makes those decisions. Do we give everybody in the company a 3% raise, or do we make room for a hire new person, or do we tuck some back into the surplus?
I have a question, Mike. We're going to do all this work and look at the budget, but after the special election in June, if the people decide they don't want pay-as-you-throw, what's that going to do? We're going to have to relook at everything.
That's not an
again.
issue. That's not an issue. We're gonna rig this election, we got it.
We're going to make it transparent.
Be transparent, yeah.
Well, the number is 432,000.
Well, I mean,
Pay as you throw would go up. Right.
meaning that the city would probably need to get out of the trash business altogether.
Yeah, we could always, yeah.
I mean,
No
where are
alternative.
we going to find $400,000?
Doesn't exist.
Because if people hear that there may be a tax increase this year, and they're already doing pay-as-you-throw, they're going to be like, well, why do we want pay-as-you-throw? I mean, why?
It's going to be a bigger tax.
A bigger tax.
Much larger.
Well, if you can imagine, before pay-as-you-throw, there was, what, $700,000 being put into the trash business?
Yeah, almost 800.
Almost $800,000 in trash, picking up people's trash and taking it somewhere. And it's a really good view of why.
If taxes are going to increase, people are going to want, something for their dollar, and they're going to want the city to pick up the trash and throw anything they want away, basically.
I actually think the public has a pretty good concept of what pay-as-you-throw does for the mill rate at this point. I could be wrong,
I hope you're right.
I agree with that. The early stages, not so, but I think this is.
I think there's a general understanding of that.
And I think
Because we are still providing the service, because the $2 for that bag doesn't even cover the full cost of disposal. They're still paying less than if they hire. If I were to hire a private contractor at $20 a month, I'd be paying about 2.5 times what I pay now in a household of 6.
So, we're not gonna vote on the budget until June? Is that what we're gonna do?
That's what it sounds like. Yep. All right.
I had a question for the chief. While Chief.
Which one?
Massey. Sorry, police chief. And I know that you've probably covered this all before, but some of it was covered before I was kind of on board. With the SUVs, can you just go over the cost benefit of getting an SUV as opposed to a non-SUV? For the police cruisers?
The SUVs obviously are much better in the weather.
But don't they make all-wheel drive? Doesn't the state use all-wheel drive cruisers?
Some of them are. The Chevys are still rear-wheel drive. The Fords are all-wheel drive. But the Ford sedans are so small, almost every department is getting away from them. You can't even utilize the back seat with a prisoner. There's just no room for them. So I think you'll find that most police departments are transitioning over to SUVs. Again, they're better in weather, they're better cargo capacity, there's a better trade-in for them. The cost difference is minimal, and you get that back when you get your trade-ins. But they have so much more versatility than those standard sedans in terms, again, of cargo and height and comfort and room.
Wasn't the cost difference, if I remember correctly, this was a while ago, but wasn't it just several $1,000s difference between what you were wanting to buy and what you could have? Seems like I remember there being a side-by-side, and the difference wasn't that.
Considering trade-in, maybe?
Yeah, because I think because of the trade-in, and I don't remember their cost being that monstrous. When we think of buying a sedan versus a SUV, we think a huge difference, but I think
Right.
it seems like when it came with the trade-in and everything that goes into the equipment that you would have to add to the sedans, it was a very minimal.
The sedans are quite expensive because, as you know, they come specially equipped, special suspension, special heating unit, special electrical. So they're quite a bit more. A typical sedan right now is about $29,000. I'm paying a couple $1,000s more for an SUV.
The gas mileage is approximately the same, correct?
Pardon?
The gas mileage is approximately the same.
On the SUVs, we're getting around 20. And the sedans, again, best case scenario, going downhill in neutral with the wind behind you, 22, 23 miles.
Thank you.
Have we inputted a higher rate for IT visiting the other towns yet? We had talked about raising their rate from 75 an hour to maybe a little more. Will we discuss that?
We've finished the proposal. Josh just finished it today. So we do have a proposal to make that would increase both Winslow and Oakland's annual amount. It's a very substantial increase, and I guess our recommendation to the council is going to be to phase it in over a 2-year period. If that happens, the amount that we get on an annual basis would be no more than probably 10,000 in the next year. Josh, do you have?
It all depends how we split it up, but the proposal is almost double what we're getting now. However, we phase that in, I guess is...
So it'd be maybe 15,000 more this next year and 15,000 more the following
15
year?
to 20 the following year, yep.
Something like
But
that.
Josh, the important point to note, we're not bilking anyone, we're simply charging them a reasonable rate for our services, correct?
Well, what we're doing that we haven't done in the past is we're figuring the cost of our built-in equipment that they're taking advantage of.
Yeah.
So we have servers here that we bought, we had to buy anyway,
Yeah.
and they're renting space on our servers. And we haven't really charged them adequately for that in the past, in addition to a few other things, which in a way we'd have to do anyway for our own system, but they benefit from it. So those kind of things we haven't charged them for.
They haven't shared all the costs.
They haven't shared all the costs, but the increase could be very, very substantial to both communities, and our, again, recommendation is to phase it in over a 2-year period. And I can go over those numbers with the council the next time we talk. There's another revenue piece too. I don't know if Matt has that number regarding the pool fees. We're going to talk about this next Tuesday night?
Right, with the recreation committee, yeah. We thought that raising the rates, our proposed rates could bring in, if it's a good summer and we're real busy like we typically are, $8,000 to $10,000. So for the recreation committee's recommendation.
And again, that's the same thing, it's just raising it to really,
Actually, it's still pretty cheap.
Right.
it's still very, very cheap, but raising it to what it needs to be in order to keep the pool running safely and honestly. We lose money every year on the pool and
There's not
most,
big increases, they're about, what was it, a dollar?
Yeah.
Dollar for the pass.
They weren't big.
No.
I think the biggest one was
And
like
that's
$10.
pretty much breaking even.
We'll be
Yeah,
breaking
like-
even, hopefully.
Right, that was the whole option of doing that.
I think to answer your question, with those two revenue increases, again, if we do a 2-year thing with IT, probably not more than 30,000 total for both, including both. That's including it. Other than that, on the revenue side, there's not a whole lot. I mean, we've gone over the revenues many, many times. We've increased the motor vehicle excise revenue when we initially presented the budget. We think that motor excise fees have shown a very healthy increase over a couple of years now.
Be a little nervous on the code revenue.
True. Yeah, that's a very good point. So while we may be saying we can get more revenue here and there, our revenue estimate for code
Might be
for
overestimated.
permits
Might be overestimated.
for next year. Because we have a number in our budget of 125, is it, Chuck? Or
That 125 is what we have, we're not coming anywhere close to that this year. That's what we have budgeted.
we're not even going to make half of that this year.
but if we have the redevelopment piece that we're hoping to have, there would have to be permits being purchased.
There would have to be some.
Correct.
A lot, if,
Hard to say. Would it get us to 125? Hard to say, but should be more than what we're getting this current year.
Right. I have no information on that. You're looking at me, I have no idea what redevelopment you're...
Well, Main Street improvement.
Right, but is that anywhere near what Colby and the hospitals and all that did over the years that Todd Harvey did?
there's some pretty big pieces.
Yeah, I'm asking the question,
Yeah.
not answering. I don't know. What's planned?
Mike, does this figure include the new potential code enforcement officer salary in the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
That number is still in.
Okay.
Although we did have discussions about whether we would really want to do that because
Because of the budget.
Right, we still don't know. Everything's still on the table.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, we got more work to do. Everybody.
I think that's a $20,000, $18,000 increase, the result of that new position.
With benefits?
Yep.
Well, you're talking the differential.
The differential,
what we had before.
what we had before,
Right.
right? I'm correct on that, right? Yeah,
Because planning went down to part-time,
correct.
and so we'd be using that part-time
Right.
Help
plus
pay
a
for
little
part
more.
of this. Correct.
So that diversion plus what we...
But there is the option of
Except
cutting
for
the entire
18.
thing out and then making the whole thing a savings. Correct. That is an option.
Say it too loud.
I'm just saying, quiet. All options are on the table.
I feel like there are a lot of people in the audience that might be here because they have a question. Maybe not.
I think most of them work for the city of Waterville.
Maybe they were told to be here.
You were advised
so.
to be here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some pretty substantial, when behavioral health and KV Cap Transportation and KV Cog. I didn't know if there was anybody here that wanted to.
I know Ross is here from KV Cog.
Jim's here for people.
Oh, Jim, too, okay. Thought you weren't coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It would be I feel like this would be a good time if you're here to say something.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jim Wood, Transportation Director with KV Cap. We run both the Kennebec Explorer public transit bus and the KV Van social service transportation system. Here in Waterville, throughout our Kennebec Explorer system, we did a significant redesign on our transit system with new buses and new routes. new schedules, and it's been working very well. And I know a lot of people in this area really rely on this public bus for their independence. I mean, I know we've gone from about 11,000 rides a year in the Waterville area in 2011 to almost 18,900 last year, and we're on our way to 20,000 rides this year. And if you excuse me for 1 second. 3,700 of those rides are to people with disabilities, who use the accessible equipment on the bus, and they use it, and because we've been able to expand our service to some degree, they're using it for everything that people use public transit for. They're using it to work, they're using it to go shopping, they're using it to get to the doctor, and these are for people who don't have any other means of transportation. And I'm of the personal belief that you shouldn't have to have a set of car keys in order to live in a given community. Unfortunately, if this comes into place, we'll have to eliminate the Waterville bus, which we don't want to see happen, but
Does KB Cap have other funds they designate to this bus?
yes.
But so KB Cap could have with their own, have you had KB Cap gone through their own inter-budget
Absolutely.
discussions? And KB Cap has decided that they would not put an additional $10,000 towards this bus.
Right now, we're like a lot of organizations, we're running a deficit in this program, so I'm trying to fill in gaps in order to keep the buses running myself. We've gone through some significant changes in every aspect. I'm not sure how many are familiar with the Medicaid brokerage system that was implemented 2 years ago. I think it's functioning better now than it has been, but it certainly had an impact on both our program and any discretionary funds that we had available that we might be able to contribute to this piece too. At one point several years ago, we relied almost exclusively on municipal support to cover our local match for our operating assistance. Now the municipal funding makes up about a third of the local match for our operating assistance, and we're getting a lot more support from businesses and other entities. But it's just, like our winter this year was as bad as everybody else's. We had a lot of challenges with our buses this year. We had some cost overruns and maintenance and so on. We would have to make some very, very difficult decisions too.
Do the 18,000 people that you anticipate riding pay anything for that?
Yes, they do. They do pay a fare. It's $1.25, $1 if you're riding in town, $1.25 if you're crossing town lines between here and Fairfield, and $3 between here and Augusta. And a fare increase is something that we're going to have to consider also. But I know
For
a lot of
18,000,
people,
if it was $1 a piece, $1 fare increase.
and I know a lot of the people
75
use the
cents
bus.
to make up 10,000, 50 cents, right?
Yeah, well, not necessarily. The way our funding works is every dollar we take in fare box revenue, we apply directly to our operating costs. And after we apply the fare box revenue, then we can use our federal and state drawdowns after that. So like the local funding that we get from municipalities actually has almost a 2-to-1 effect once we compound the state and the federal money that it matches. But without that match, we have a more difficult time getting access to the state and federal money. And the fare box revenue is a straight dollar for dollar in, dollar out. So the funding we get from municipalities really has a compounding factor with the federal and state grants.
So what you're saying, Jim, most of that fare box revenue is basically for maintenance of your fleet?
Yeah, and even then it doesn't, our fare box revenue basically covers 10-15% of our overall operating costs. The rest of it comes from match and general subsidies.
I'm sure most of these people are on fixed incomes.
Yes, they are. The vast majority of our riders are seniors or people with disabilities.
So it's something that
and
could
people
be
on fixed incomes. Yeah.
Well, and because we're trying to really promote more pedestrian access into the city and it to be more pedestrian friendly, and so public transportation is something that cities need as well. This was the one cut that I saw that I felt like would affect probably the most in terms of people, like the most people being affected.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Councilor Boucher, on that. And I'm sure most of these people couldn't afford a vehicle anyways. So that is one cut I would agree with you, that should come on the table.
I guess I'm just wondering why KB Cap's entire budget, they don't want to put another $10,000 to make up for it.
Because nonprofits don't have an extra $10,000
Yeah.
laying around.
They have a huge budget. They have a very large budget.
Most of it goes into programming, and it's You know, we don't have, we've been hurting like everybody else is in terms of discretionary funds. You know, in order to use to, you know, many of our programs have been running deficits too, and a lot of our funding is for very specific programming. And, you know, let's say for, you know, match stuff for our federal grants for the public transit system is out of necessity. It needs to be discretionary money that we can clutch around. Most of our programs, no, we don't have that discretionary funding to spend on. Even though the budget itself is pretty large.
And I'm sure this is a lifeline for people to get their medications,
It is
their
indeed.
food, their groceries, you know, just different things like that. That's just standard of living.
You want to fly a budget, find me another 10 grand. I mean, with the problem,
I know, I gave up
we're
my
in our
Franco
own budget
fest.
crisis. I guess that's my concern.
But no, but this could be, I mean, this is, if you can't get your medication, because you can't get there, I mean,
Well, you have all ages at Ryan. I know there's
Yes, we do.
students who take, I mean, I have foster care students who take
Budget
cable cat
last
buses to school or to appointments and things like that.
And we do, we work with the Alphon Youth Center. We have after-school program so that the kids can actually take the school bus to the Alphon Youth Center, and then we have a safe ride home in the afternoon. Like I say, and the funding, just so everybody understands, the funding that we get from municipalities goes exclusively to support our Explorer program. We don't use it to support the social service side, you know, with the Medicaid appointments and all the use. It's strictly to the public transit program.
thank
And
you.
again, we have many residents here that now use it because we have commuter service between here and Augusta with the new hospital open. A lot of people now are using it to get back and forth to work. Thank you.
My name is Ross Nason. I'm a planner at Kennebec Valley Council of Governments and also on the proposed chopping block. It's funny, everything that I hear from the council for your own budget crisis, and I hear from other organizations, it's the same for us. And I've done municipal budgeting for years. It's not fun. I don't relish your jobs at all. It's more challenging now than ever before. And all I can say is, thank you. Keep up the hard work. That's all I'm going to do tonight is to do some of this hard work stuff. Rosie Venetestein is our executive director. Rosie's been very ill, hospitalized. She's supposed to be on bed rest for the next couple of weeks. She's really sorry she couldn't be here tonight. She hopes that she can come at some point during the budget or voting process and speak to you and say some of the things that I might not say. I might say to you some a little bit more basic, down to earth stuff. She does have a statement she wants me to read to you regarding economic development, though, that I think will address some of your concerns. And I'll save that towards the end. One of the things that I want to make really clear to this council that may not be obvious to all of you, especially if you've not engaged with KVCOG before, is that we're not some private consulting firm. We're not a nebulous business trying to get your vendor dollars. We're you. We are wholly governed by municipalities. We're wholly governed and basically owned by our member towns, our member communities. And each and every one of you are qualified through our bylaws to serve on our board of directors, of which Waterville's appointee is Ann Beveridge, which I'm sure you know. But I would invite you to serve on that board, or at least the General Assembly, to kind of try to get a handle on what we do and have a say on the things the programs that we adopt. What I have tonight for you is a list of our services that we offer, which would go away if you're no longer members, and some services that are still accessible if you are no longer members. Many of you have seen this before. I'm just going to give you half the stack there. Some of you may not have. I think, Rosemary, you might have seen them. What I want to talk to you specifically about, though, that is absolutely not on that list, is I asked some of my colleagues at the COG yesterday to look at some of the work they've done specifically for the city of Waterville over the last year or so, and to give me to quantify that work. And I got a few results back. It was a 24-hour turnaround, so I didn't get everyone's back. There's more. I haven't taken the time to quantify my work that I've done for the city of Waterville in the last year, but I assure you it's a great deal. I was on the solid waste committee that helped with the pay-as-you-throw. So we saved 400 grand there, Mike. Can I get like a 10% cut of that? 5% cut would pay for our 10% cut would 5% cut would pay for our membership dues. Joel Greenwood, who is one of our community planners, he does GIS work and things. He's helped with some of the city planning. He's put in about 155 hours of work at our member rate, which would be about $10,000 that you've not had to pay us, just for that one guy. He does stuff like what would be considered community planning, GIS work, that sort of thing, ordinances. I'm not sure all that he's done. I didn't take the time to get a list of projects he's worked on. He just gave me a total. I do things for the city of Waterville, such as the Hazardous Waste Collection Day, the Universal Waste Collection, those sorts of things. Now that program, which probably represents about perhaps $6,000 worth of service to the city for your membership dues, that program wouldn't go away, but I have to charge you for it, and it would be pretty expensive. We have two rates at the COG. One that we charge town owners, basically similar setup to like what owning the MRC, and then another rate that's our true cost that doesn't reflect membership leverage dollars. And I don't want to in the future have to charge the city of Waterville for that when we do stuff, and when we have projects that bring in revenue to the region. I want Waterville to be able to have access to those projects. I have a couple of interesting numbers that you may have heard, may not have heard. And one of those is $2.1 million or $2.3 million KVCOG in the last 4 years has brought into the region in the form of grants that you have access to most of. $5 million is what we've leveraged into the region over the last 4 years total, all the services that we do. Municipal dollars is just like what Jim says with his organization. Municipal dollars leverages our federal contracts. That money goes away if we go away. That money is usually about 10 to 15% of our budget. So every dollar that you spend in your organization, KVCOG, leverages another, as much as $7 or $8. So if you spend $18,000, you're getting at least $90,000 or $100,000 back. I'm going to say more than that because we do an awful lot of regional stuff too that's synergistic, but tangible dollars is probably in the $100,000 range. We have DOT contracts that we utilize. We have state planning contracts we utilize. We have federal dollars through USDA that we access, and we only can access any of those programs for our members because of the membership fee. So I realize in these tight times, it's hard, but during the hard times and during times where you need to look at budgets really closely and conservatively, it's really important to think about regional efforts, and savings that can be leveraged in regional efforts. So now I'd like to read to you Rosie's statement, which is above my pay grade. I'm not an economic developer. I do not know about economic development much. But she does, and she's quite a pro. And she says that although it's difficult for local communities to think regionally when working on their budgets, that is the best time to do so. There's a lot of effort being put into Waterville on many levels for economic development. And there are other efforts focusing on tourism, recreational assets. There are efforts to promote the arts and culture. There are efforts focusing on marketing, both at the local and the regional level. And it's important to understand when developing or creating a destination, such as Waterville's attempting to do, that it's not something that happens within one community offering everything that is necessary. This typically is done as a region. So in economic developers' terms, you develop a region. You don't try to be an island. And the Kennebec Valley region is our region that we often hang this hat on. So when taken all together from the service centers, downtowns, arts, cultures, recreation, you can create a destination. And I believe that that's what the direction that Waterville is going to go in. I truly believe that. And when collaborating on any of these items, looking at collaborations and leveraging of limited resources makes a lot of sense. A lot of synergy there. And with many towns and organizations working on similar initiatives, to join forces will create a more comprehensive program and bring more resources and funds to the table. And KVCOG is vital in doing just that. So thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you might have about what we can offer Waterville and do offer Waterville and have continually offered Waterville.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Ross was a big help during our pay-as-you-throw work.
It did have an impact on the airport as well, from my understanding as well, right, Mike?
On the airport?
Yeah, there's grants and stuff, and they do some writing for that, according to Ann.
I don't think so.
I believe Ann Beveridge. You can say some things as far as what KVCOG from my emails with you.
I think Ross covered most of it. I think what I mentioned to you in my email message was Gail Pace's help with our CDBG applications in the past, and Chris Huck and Joel Greenwood's help with the comprehensive plan. Chris helped us understand what the state was looking for as far as the review of the comprehensive plan was concerned, and Chris provided some of the data for the plan. Joel made maps for the plan. I also mentioned the EDA funding. KVCOG is an economic development administration region, and federal money is funneled through EDA. And so as members of KVCOG, we are able to insert projects that we'd like to see funded here into the annual plan for economic development, call it the SEDS, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. Rosemary attends those meetings, and as members of the organization, we get those projects into the plan, and then we're eligible for EDA funding for the project. So the Airport Road Business Park is an example, and also the future interchange down at Trafton Road are examples of EDA funding that's gone through KVCOG. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
So, we can hear what needs to get cut when we give a 3% pay increase. Across the board.
Why don't they get 3% across the board? I mean, the city pay increases.
Or 2%.
2%.
We have an audience member who has a comment.
My name is Patty Vashon. I was a teacher at Winslow for 37 years. I retired at a salary that my 20-year-old, mid-20 students are making as they begin their career. But I'm here because I'm an educator. And someone mentioned people moving into this area. We know that people move into an area for the schools. So we need to have a vested interest in our schools. I think I would just like you to remember that what we offer to the parents as programs, qualified teachers, it will be a reason for them to move to Waterville. They may work in other places, but they will move to Waterville. They will pay the taxes. I live in Waterville. I pay the taxes. And I'm willing to, because I'm an educator and I believe strongly that education is a basic need. And if we harm that need, we will be in trouble. Thank you.
I thank you, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think this is where I see an issue. If you look at the budget, we are gutting a lot of the gifted and talented, which is where a lot of people are going to be attracted into a school. And we're giving 3% increases to teachers and also to administrators, because their contracts are tied to the teacher's contract, along with additional cash-out benefits. On top of that, we're spending, I think I leveled up about $30,000 of Common Core math books and about $80,000 on iPads and Chrome tablets. So to me, to say, do we handle the contract? To me, what I find unfortunate is that negotiators are willing to go in and say, well, we might have to sacrifice a few teachers when it comes budget time because we're just going to negotiate this contract. And then when the crunch comes, we start cutting things that are like gifted and talented that could actually be attractions. So I agree with you, but just shoveling money at it isn't necessarily the answer, and I don't think that.
I think shoving money at it. I've stood out in the rain on the bridge fighting for teacher contracts in Winslow many times. And I think, as I reiterated, I'm going to reiterate what I said. I think investing in our youth in this town is what it might be a reason for them to stay here. To say, oh, I like living in Waterville, I was educated here. I will go away to college and I want to move back. But we need to respect our teachers, and by giving them a salary that makes them want to work in our schools. If we want quality education, we have to have quality teachers.
What is the average salary? The average salary of a teacher, not the starting salary. Average salary. Do you guys have that?
I don't want that.
Because I know in the state of Maine, I think statewide it's like $51,000. In Bangor it's $80,000, but they've got their own budget problems worse than ours.
Yeah, I was a foreign language teacher. I taught French and Spanish. I am a teacher. Doctors don't stop being doctors. Teachers don't stop being teachers.
Right.
I taught French and Spanish. And I also taught a stretch program gratis and did drama at the high school. My retiring salary was $57,000, 36 years. Now, why did I stay in teaching? Why didn't I go and work to interpret? Why didn't I go into the diplomatic corps? Because I am passionate about teaching. Now, I don't think young people today are less, I think they're a little more monetary than my generation. So I think that I'm not arguing with you, but I'm just asking you that if you want to have people moving to Waterville, a good school system with qualified teachers, more than qualified teachers, will help you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just add to that, to get the best teachers, we make those salary increases based on their merits and not for being showing up on time for work every day and actually having reviews to back it up. And that goes for administrators too, because we have 11 and they have contracts too that are tied to teacher contracts that are not based on performance evaluations and reviews. Same with the city. I'm not picking on the schools. City contracts too.
One other item that just came to me that we've been notified of as a threat is our county tax. And I think it was in today's paper, it was an article about how the governor wants to push the county administration and funding back onto the counties. So I think I sent you all a copy a couple weeks ago of an email, right? That for Kennebec County, it's a huge increase. So I think we need to do everything we can to talk to Henry Beck, Tom Longstaff, Scott Searway about...
Tom's here in the house.
House of Representatives is here.
Half. So, but you haven't been given any numbers yet.
No, yeah, we don't have any numbers yet. Budget negotiation going on, not surprisingly, very difficult. One of the things that, with regard to county expenses, that's under consideration right now, we don't have any firm answer of where it's going. It's been debated a lot in the last 10 days. and that is whether or not the county jails will be returned to the county or will continue to have, state oversight. And if they return to the county, that's a big jump in county expenses. If the county is now responsible for 100% of the maintenance of the jails, and that's one of the issues we're dealing and could have a significant effect. We're working on the budget every day. Appropriations committee is there almost every night, late into the night, so it's a hard process. It's going very slowly at the moment. I'll try to keep you posted when I can about things. I don't have any definite numbers. A few things seem, nothing is certain until the budget is final, but a few things seem relatively certain that revenue sharing will be at least flat funded. That seems pretty solid. It's not what we wish for in many cases, but it seems to be there. The idea of taxing the nonprofits is probably dead in the water. I just don't think that's going anywhere. Maybe at some future time, a fee for services, but the taxing the nonprofits is probably not going anywhere. So those are some of the issues. There are a lot more, as you can imagine. We meet and talk about the budget every morning, and the appropriations committee works on it all day. I was thinking of what Eric said a moment ago, and I'm not sure I even want to say this in public, but we'll be transparent, right? When you say it maybe the third week in June, I just sat quietly in my chair and said, that's a bit optimistic. It could happen.
When do you have to be done, Tom?
Pardon?
When do you have to be done? Aren't you supposed to be done by July 1st as well?
One of the first things that I learned when I went into the legislature back in 2010 was the most important word in government. You can use it in city government as well as notwithstanding. Notwithstanding the fact that the statutory adjournment date for the legislature is June 17th. If we are not finished by June 17th, we have to have special sessions. We don't get paid for them, nor should we. But we have to have special sessions until we have finished the work, and that includes having a budget, which, according to the Constitution of the state, has to be a balanced budget. So, we could be there until it's done. And so we do have a statutory adjournment date, but if we are not finished, we need to stay until we're finished. The real cliff is if we don't have a budget adopted by July 1st, we go into that state shutdown, which everybody wants to avoid. But there are some very difficult issues. And we meet every morning to talk about where we are and what the issues are right now. And I will communicate some of the things I've heard here tonight to the Appropriations Committee. And I wish I had some more definite news for you, except that we're working 7 days a week now. Maybe not Sundays yet, but to try to get as much progress as we can. And there's some difficult issues we need. So I'll try to answer some questions if I can, but it's a difficult process to be sure.
Do you feel as confident that the extra money for general purpose aid is there?
Relatively so. Yeah. I think it's one of the things that you feel a little more confident about. But again, until it's done, I don't want to go on the bottom line and say this is definitely going to happen, because in the final compromises, you never know what's going to happen. Yeah, right. In answer to your question, we'll be there until, some of you may have seen in the newspaper that I have the distinction of being the senior Democratic member of the House, which simply means I'm in age the oldest.
Congratulations.
But that means that in response to your question, Dana, the one thing that goes, there are two things. The one thing that goes with that, I have the privilege of making the motion to adjourn sine die, which is that motion that happens sometime late in the night on the last day when the legislature is done for this session. And so I'm not quite sure yet when I will be able to make the motion to adjourn sine die. I think it will be later than June 17th. I agree with you. But who knows? Things might move more quickly, I'd be surprised.
When they don't get paid, they move quickly.
No.
Not necessarily.
You know, if you talk about the average salary for a legislator being $11,000, it's not big money.
Government shutdown.
Thanks for being here, Tom. I know you come to our meetings and you're at this meeting, so thank you.
Well, I still live in Waterville, right?
For the county tax, we have a 2.5% increase built in. Well, we have it, if you look at it, it looks like a big cut, but that's because we have been doing a catch-up payment. So,
Okay, so we do have 2.5.
yeah, 2.5% increase is always built in. I mean, I made a call months and months ago, and
Okay.
never not, but that's always built in, so if it comes in.
Well, the jail thing was much more than 2.5.
Yeah.
At least you get
Right,
some.
right, so I just want to make sure, because you can't, it's hard to tell that on the paper, because.
In different counties are going to be hit differently with that.
Correct.
What's the total amount?
There are winners and losers.
I
What's
think a
that?
lot of the counties want it.
I have 745,000.
Seven.
And 727 is basically the annual piece that we had been paying. There was another catch-up piece in addition to that, what we paid over 4 or 5 years, but that's done this year, so. Just didn't want you to look at the big cut and think that we had a cut in the annual fee budget.
Yeah. That happened when the county went to a July to June year instead of a calendar year.
Right, they needed to make up that extra 6 months, so they could.
Correct. And they allowed towns to pay that extra 6 months over a full 5-year period.
Right. That was around $70,000.
Artificial way to get more money out of them.
Sometimes they don't want to make county government. Like if you don't have anything for school, study or
County governments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we done?
I guess it's up to you.
Next step.
It's just seem to.
Yeah. I think, I have nothing new to say. You've heard it. And we're done. Let's talk more about it.
He's getting costs out of his living. Was someone else?
So what's the next step?
Dig deep.